I think we all know the answer to this question, but this is just one of those things that even though we know the answer, we still gonna watch it anyways. We still gonna clarify, just make sure that it is exactly what we think it is. I figured I'd just do everybody a favor.
Watson was an inmate at a California prison, sharing a cell with David Bob and Louis Conti, both of which were serving life sentences for aggravated sexual assault of an underage child. Day in and day out, Watson saw how the two
Bruh.
felt no remorse, and how they went on to brag about their crime. They even allegedly taunted
Brag?
him by watching PBS Kids in a shared prisoner space. I could not sleep having not done what every instinct told me, said Watson in his confession letter. First, he tried moving to a different facility to get away from his violent tendencies, a request that was later
Nah.
declined.
They declined
Watson
it?
finally gave in and decided
This
that he
nigga literally told y'all, if y'all don't move me, I'm going to kill them. And they said, nah, yeah, I think
Quote,
everybody just
just
wanted
do
the same
everybody a
thing here.
favor, and picked up a cane and started beating them. He openly confessed the killing to the guards and is now serving a bigger sentence. Now, it's bad enough to be a child molester, but to show it off is even worse. The same way ex-cops are hated in prison, child molesters are treated worse. The system has taken some action in the past to protect such inmates, so let's dive in to understand how a child molester is treated in prison. Now, if anybody goes to prison, nobody advertises their wrongdoings unless it's a crime for which they get street cred. Like we said, if you're an ex-cop, you'll have to convince them that you're niet policia. But as a sex offender, you're highly likely to be caught. In fact, according to the Federal Bureau of Prisons, roughly 11.6% of the federal inmate population consists of prisoners incarcerated for sexual offenses.
11%.
This number not only includes child molesters, but also those involved in obscenity or child prostitution.
What the fuck?
When child molesters walk into prison, their life hangs in the balance of anonymity and security level.
263 years, holy.
Higher protection, but it's the other way around. A higher security level means more hardened criminals like murderers and racists, which ultimately leads to a worse experience. They can feel safe inside a low-security federal prison that has dormitory housing and non-violent inmates. But if an inmate admits to being a sex offender, they're typically checked in. This means that they must go into protective custody for the sake of not getting attacked by fellow inmates. There have been countless stories about sex offenders getting harassed, attacked, and brutalized as part of the institutional culture. If they can't get protected and brutalized, there have been countless
Yo, they turned that nigga into Mr. Potato Head, bro. What the fuck?
Brutalized as part of the institutional culture.
Holy
if they can't
shit.
Get protective custody. They have to force their way into long-term solitary confinement.
He got fucked up.
Another safe place is the rougher yards. If they don't check in there, they're sometimes beat off a yard. Whether it's in the chow hall or in front of the lieutenant's office, prisoners knock the sex offender to the ground and stomp them in the prison guard's view. To avoid being the next David Bob or Louis Conti, first things first, don't brag. There's nothing to be proud of.
What the fuck is this scene?
Keeping a low profile is important, and there's no need to
needlessly
carry a fake alias because some prisoners can get background checks pulled and can verify. Let's now take you through some of the worst deaths reported in prisons of child molesters and sex offenders, starting with the brutal murder of the loudmouth, Mr. Robert Munger. In 2020, Shane Goldsby was moved to the Airway Heights Corrections Center.
That nigga does not look human. I don't know what it is about his character build. He looks like a shark.
Was moved to the Airway Heights Corrections Center, or AHCC, in Washington, where he was a cellmate with the convicted child molester Robert Munger.
Strong ass jaw.
Goldsby shared how Munger bragged about his crimes. Considering that he was charged with first-degree child rape, 3 counts of child molestation, and first and second-degree child porn possession, you can imagine Goldsby's ears were full. According to Goldsby, quote, "He kept giving me details about what happened and what he did, about the photos and videos of him doing this stuff." Before he could turn a deaf ear, he heard a story that was too familiar. One of Munger's stories was literally about Goldby's underage sister who was raped. Goldsby said, quote, "I was like, what the f***? This stuff doesn't happen," he told the local broadcaster KHQ. "You're talking the same institution, the same unit, the same pod, in the same cell as this dude. That's like hitting the jackpot in the casino 7 times."
Dead ass. Like, what the fuck? What are the odds of this? Yo, that nigga.
Seeing it as an opportunity of a lifetime,
that nigga.
Goldsby hit Munger in the face and head area about 14 times. Then stomped on his head at least 4 times, gave him a few kicks, and walked away. Munger ultimately died of his injuries. Now, this all seems too good to be true, nigga. Isn't it? This is why Goldsby felt that it was a setup, and that the prison officials intentionally put him face to face with him. Next up, we have a former Cobb County church and school volunteer named Cesar Pastrana, who admitted to molesting 9 boys. In 2012, he was sentenced to life in Hancock State Prison in Sparta. In March 2020, a fight broke out at 12:15 p.m., leading to the death of Pastrana. According to the Georgia Department of Corrections, quote, "Agents have reason to believe offender Cesar Pastrana died as a result of injuries sustained during an altercation involving another inmate on March 13th. Although it is not clear whether his death was related to the crimes he committed against minors or whether it was an unrelated incident, many believe that the other inmate attacked him for abusing innocent children. For now, his death is ruled out as homicide." Now, some would argue that a fate worse than death is torture. Now, to some extent, they're right, especially considering what the 45-year-old inmate Charles shares about Britain's toughest jails, Moreland Prison. He told Vice shares,
"They held him down, cut him across his nipples, his face." There's 4 stars. His dick, and then one of the lads stuck a blade in. Fuck. Yo. Yeah, that nigga's right. That is for sure worse than death, but that nigga deserved it. My mate was the wing cleaner. Took him an hour to clear up the shower and walls.
About Britain's toughest jails, Moreland Prison. He told Vice News that he had witnessed a sex offender being slashed in the shower. He said, quote, "They held him down, cut him across the nips, his face, his and then one of the lads stuck a blade in his." Also sharing the jail space was former footballer of Sunderland FC, Adam Johnson, who was jailed for kissing, grooming, and groping a 15-year-old schoolgirl fan. According to Charles, Johnson had to convince fellow inmates he is not a child molesting nonce. Charles also added that his mate was the wing cleaner. And for him, it, quote, "took him an hour to clear up the shower and walls." As you can tell, the fate of these inmates is either getting stabbed, sacked, or slashed.
I think it was a football player, soccer player.
Statistics of 2015. Male sex offenders make up about 15% of the prison population, but account for nearly 30% of homicide victims since 2007. They still are a vulnerable population within a prison setting. And without unit management, psychology treatment programs, and re-entry planning, they will continue down their path. This is why the Federal Bureau of Prisons came up with a new place dedicated to sex offenders only, the Sex Offender Management Program, or SOMP facility. Although it feels like a fancy rehab for them to get better, the special mission achieved with this program is protection from other inmates.
Honest with you, but
they
are
enable
lost,
these inmates
lost
to stay
causes.
at a specialized prison where they are more carefully monitored. According to the Bureau, quote, "This higher concentration of sex offenders within SOMP institutions helps offenders feel more comfortable acknowledging their concerns and seeking treatment." Here's the challenge. This program is restricted to a few prisons only, ranging from low security to high security. This means that after the person is indicted, he has to immediately put in a transfer request to one of these facilities, which you heard in some stories earlier doesn't always get approved easily. In some cases, the review process could take months. During that time, inmates continue to bring up the "what are you in for?" question. So, to get to an SOMP facility, the child molester needs to seek a judicial recommendation, which is not something any ordinary person can do. Luckily, there are consulting groups that, for a nominal fee, can significantly increase the likelihood of SOMP designation. In case the person is already convicted and serving time in a federal detention center, he needs to buy a few months for his appeal to go through. Now, while it seems like an SOMP facility is a way to go, some relevant programs have failed in the past. Not only that, but some prisons are also stiff on their rules and continue to put sex offenders on kill row. Take, for example, the Moreland prison, which is criticized for not having a treatment program, and was also the gruesome prison where Charles witnessed the slashing of a sex offender. Remember that? Well, their story doesn't end there. Commenting on Adam Johnson's condition in Moreland, Charles shares that, quote, "The biggest mistake Johnson could make would be to stay on the knot swing for a second longer than he has to." He further added, quote, "He ain't touched a baby or a 10-year-old, but the longer he stays tucked up with that kind of scum, the more suspicious other prisoners will get." He lastly added that the former Sunderland player can't throw any millionaire straps, and that he'd be old news when a real monster arrives. How do you think SOMP facilities can improve on treating child molesters?
We were talking about the same nigga that whole time. I got lost there for a second, I'm not gonna lie. I'm confused as to who is criticizing that. Like, who is against these child molesters or sex offenders being put on death row? I don't see the problem. But that's crazy that even even some of the, like you said, in the higher security prisons, the more, the more fucked up crimes that those criminals have committed, even with how far they go and how far gone they are, they still have some sort of, like, morality where they just don't tolerate that and still will kill that nigga. So that's interesting. Or still will attempt to kill these niggas that are offenders.